Hey Internet, I'm Simon Squibb, your host at the Good Luck Club. I believe luck is an ingredient that's necessary for a successful life. Whatever you're starting, building or shipping, I'm here to tell you, without luck, you're not going to make it. I've been testing my luck as an entrepreneur since I was 15 years old. I have had plenty of failures and successes. And I'm fascinated by the things I couldn't control, the moments that made my career, and the ones that threatened to end it. In each episode, I'll invite a guest to share their stories about luck, the good and bad, and together we'll test my theory about luck's role. Welcome, Malcolm.
Hey, Simon. Good to be on the show.
Thanks so much for coming on. Listen, I always like to start the podcast by asking our guests this simple question. What does success mean to you?
I was looking at the questions in advance, and it's quite interesting because I think the answer is different depending on the stage of business that you're at or the stage of where you're coming into this. So when you start off as an entrepreneur, I think the definition of success for a lot of people tends to be based around sort of financial remuneration or success on a spreadsheet. And I think for me personally, as I developed as an entrepreneur, my definition of success sort of evolved. And the midpoint for me was looking at being able to look after a better team as opposed to making a lot of money. And so for me, the team welfare became sort of my definition of success. In my later sort of business cycle, it was about the social impact that the business was having and being able to feel good about what we were doing as a business and organization. So yeah, I don't think it's just any one answer for any person. I think it sort of evolves as time evolves.
When did the social piece kick in for you? Because I think that's true. I mean, I know for myself, when I started my own first business, which was a gardening company, social impact was, I didn't even know what that meant. Or how did it end up in your mind? How did that happen?
I mean, it was just kind of a natural progression. So you get to a certain point where you're financially able to look after yourself, your business is doing well, then you want to look after the team, make sure you've got sort of a happy team. A happy team means that your business is going to be happy. It's going to be a community that you are wanting to wake up to every day and go to work, and it's a good environment to be in. And I think that's really important for creating a successful business. When you start getting to that point, you start looking further afield. For us in F&B, we started looking at the social impact of what we were doing in terms of, in the environment, animal welfare, educating people on food waste and things like that. The problem with a lot of those things is they cost money. So eliminating single-use plastic from the front of house in your restaurant means that you're buying alternatives that are more expensive. So your definition of success needs to change from being a financial definition to something which is more feel-good. And I think there's motivations to make those changes, because I think if you pass that feel-good factor onto the consumer or the customer, they'll buy into that feel-good factor and they'll feel good about contributing towards your business. So I think there's a lot of benefits to doing that.
Do you find that people do respond well to the social side? I find sometimes it gets overlooked. If it makes the experience any better, perhaps people notice it. But if they don't really feel like it makes any difference to their experience in an F&B context, do you think people do appreciate it?
It's been interesting because we've been trying to do this now for the last 8 years. Initially, not many people cared, and I think it's really good to see that the consumer is more educated today. They demand it more from businesses. However, the social impact that a business can take means that you have the luxury of having a good and successful business in the first place. If you have the financial constraints, you might not go and eliminate single-use plastics and buy more expensive products, and that's why I say the definition of success must change for an entrepreneur depending on how successful they are or what stage of the business cycle they're in.
I want to jump back to something you said as well about a happy team. I mean, I personally had lots of teams, and making everybody happy is never easy. How do you achieve that?
Well, I mean, there's a saying in F&B: if the team's happy, the customer's happy. So all of our training manuals is about looking after the team first. It's about their well-being. It's about giving them knowledge, empowering them. Spending time with the team building, staff dinners, socializing together, and building that sense of team spirit. Um, and the F&B business, restaurants, it's much like a game of football. You've got your team players, the lights go on at 6 p.m. and it's showtime. And so if the team's not motivated, doing high fives, ready to tackle service, they're not feeling empowered, they're feeling upset, you're not going to give the customer a good experience. And so it's even more important in my industry, that you've got this sense of team and unity.
Was there a particular interview technique? I mean, to find whether these people would fit within your culture, or did you train them up to fit within your culture? How did you achieve that?
Um, I mean, a lot of it comes down to personality. You've got to see if you gel with them, if you think they're going to gel with other people. And our interviews tend to be a little bit less technical, a little bit less experience based. Obviously, experience it is something that is crucial, but it's more conversational. It's to see if you're going to get on with someone, see if they'll be able to get on with customers, get on with other team members. And for me, that's a lot more crucial than how many years you've done in the industry and where you've worked.
Just thinking about listeners out there that are hiring today and trying to build a culture that you're talking about, and what tip you give them, and when trying to make their staff happy. I mean, do you think the social impact piece, but going back to that, do you think that aligns everyone? If you've got the same moral code, for example, do you think that comes into play?
Yeah, I mean, you you're looking for like-minded people. A team is a group of like-minded individuals that get along, but you've also got to be inspired by each other. And I've always told myself that you're not going to learn anything if you're not around people that inspire you every day. And that goes for the leaders. They have to be learning from their own team as well, adapting and constantly changing their viewpoint. If you think you know it all and you tell your team what to do, they'll eventually not listen to you. That to me is not being a leader. So yeah, just my advice would be make sure you inspire your team and you get inspired by them as well.
In your business, do you feel like you had a big break? How did you make it successful? What was the process?
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess this comes down to luck, yeah. And I was thinking about what my definition of luck in business is. Um, there's a saying that my mom always says to me, which is, if you're going to find a horse, it's easier to ride a horse. Um, and she always said that you make your own luck. And those were the two things that she gave me as sort of business advice. And for me, I think luck is timing. If you have the right idea, but you have the wrong timing, that to me is bad luck. So the more important thing to me is persistence. If you believe that idea was correct, but you had bad luck, bad timing, and you go back at it again and you're successful, the persistence is the answer to success. It's not the bad luck. And if you keep throwing enough mud at the wall, as long as you think that idea is good, you're eventually going to be successful. And I think you probably understand that more than anyone when you're spread betting on different startup businesses. You're going to expect some failures. But if you make the right decisions, you're persistent about your investment, you'll eventually be successful, and you'll be successful more than 50% of the time. And that's what investors try to do when they're putting money down.
I think persistence is a great word. I do sometimes notice that some people carry on, they take persistence the wrong way. Basically, they'll carry on with what they're doing even though it's not working, thinking that if they're persistent, it will eventually work. But what do you think about the concept of pivoting, for example? Have you had to do that in your businesses? Maybe you had a concept for a restaurant, for example, and when you've actually opened it, you've realized it's not what customers want and you've changed? Or how do you perceive persistence?
Yeah. So I mean, as I said, you have to have the belief that that idea is going to be successful. So if you've had bad luck, which for me is about probability, it's about timing. It's not really about the fact that there's this sort of mystical thing called luck. So it's, say you're in Hong Kong and you try to open up a business in the last 12 months, which hasn't been a great economy, but you believe that if you waited another 6 months and the economy turned for the better, then you're good. But as you said, you have to learn when things aren't going right. You have to learn from your mistakes, and that would be my biggest takeaway to people, is that you've got to know when things aren't working and to give up. There's been a few moments where I've opened up a restaurant, or I've had a business idea where I've just been too persistent to try to make it work, and it's continued to lose money, and I probably should have thrown in the towel 2 or 3 months earlier. And that's a lot of it comes down to pride and wanting something to work, and hoping for the best when really deep down you should have made a business call to have given up by then.
Isn't that a really difficult balance between the word persistence and knowing when to give up? What is that line? Is it any advice given your experience? Is it an ego thing, like, so just
Yeah.
check your ego like you said, or is it more? Is it a financial weight that makes you realize? What do you think is that trigger?
I mean, again, it's very complicated. It depends at what size your business is. Is it a component of your business that you're risking? Is a couple of months not going to hurt you in terms of your cash flow? If it's your startup business and you've spent all of your money, I mean, to you're being forced to give up. If you go back and raise money for the same bad idea, and you go back out there and lose that, then I mean, it's a very complicated thing, as you said. I think it you gain that from experience. You learn when to be persistent, you learn when to give up, and I think you just have to make your own mistakes. And I think that's been my biggest lesson, is learning the mistakes, taking the best moments from those mistakes, and making yourself stronger and a better person moving forward. And that evolution is key to any entrepreneur.
I think that's good advice. I think the learnings is another area that's fascinating to me. I think you can take the wrong learnings from failure. So you might open up a restaurant and say, well, I opened up a restaurant, but it didn't work. Don't get into the restaurant business. So the lesson was the wrong lesson. The lesson is open up a restaurant that people actually want to go to, or create an environment that people actually want to go to, right? But a lot of people to take the wrong lessons. So how do you make sure you're taking the right lessons from failure?
Um, I mean, yeah. Look, I think as an entrepreneur, when you set up your first business, if you pour your heart into that business and it's not successful, you take it personally. And I think what I've learned as an entrepreneur is that you can't take things personally. When it comes down to business, if it hasn't worked, you have to stand back up, get on your 2 feet, put your ego to the side, try again, or try something else. Um, if you start to get emotional about it, personal, that I really tried my hardest, it didn't work, the world's against me, I'm unlucky, that's the wrong mindset. And that's when you need to switch into a persistent mindset. When you're persistent and you keep hitting a wall and you keep going at it and you keep losing money, that's when maybe you should take time to reflect on your decisions and go back to the drawing board and see, tweak the financial model, look at the business plan and see what's not working. Um, I think if you do this long enough and you have the right ideas and you're willing to adapt your ideas, and adaptation is probably another key lesson for entrepreneurs. one idea doesn't, on paper, even if you've raised money for it, does not necessarily mean it's going to be successful. Just because you raised the capital for that idea, you have to continue to develop your business plan. You have to continue to learn and see how it unfolds. And I think that's also been a big lesson for me over the years.
It's interesting your take on luck as well. I think it's a fascinating area. That's why I'm focusing in on it. But I do think entrepreneurs, we think, and I think this way too, that you can influence luck. But there's an interesting argument around things that are out of your control. So, for example, the coronavirus. I mean, that must be hitting your F&B businesses quite hard right now. So that's out of your control. That is just bad luck. So how do you manage that sort of out of your control bad luck?
Yeah, well, so look, I mean, every business has an up and down, and every financial economy has a cycle. And you've got to be equally as good as handling down cycles as you can up cycles. Um, and so you can't just sit back when the economy's going down and go, all right, I'm losing money, I'm having to close restaurants, I'm not getting any customers, I've had bad luck. And again, it's mindset. Now it's like, okay, right, I need to be proactive. I need to look at what I can do to minimize this. I need to look at how I can inspire my customers to come to the restaurant, show them our hygiene measures, come up with new marketing ideas. And that's the adaptation part of being an entrepreneur. You've really got to adapt yourself to every situation, and you've got to change. You know, today's situation isn't going to be tomorrow's situation. And yeah, I mean, it's a moving wheel, and it's every day is a new game.
Did you have a big break in business? Do you see an actual moment? Is there a story there?
Yeah, so the and it's kind of this relationship between luck, which I'm of your opinion. If you've got the right mindset, you create more opportunities to be lucky, and that's really what I was taught. If you don't have the right mindset, you don't produce those opportunities. And then the other side of that is gambling. So it's taking bigger risks, or taking risks at the right moment, which requires a little bit of timing and luck to work in your favor. So for me, it was Mott 32. Mott 32 was, you know, 3 or 4 times bigger investment than we'd ever put into a restaurant. It was a huge space. It was in Central. It was Asian food, which wasn't currently in our portfolio, and we were doing this cuisine, Chinese cuisine for a Chinese market. So it felt very risky to me, but that was really the moment where we kind of just doubled down what we were doing as a business. We took the risk, and it paid off.
Best restaurant in Hong Kong, if you ask me.
Thank you.
Makes me want to move back, but luckily you're opening it up all over the world now, so that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. No, we've got 7 new projects around the world, and we're in 5 different locations currently. So
that's another area I think for entrepreneurs listening out there, you always hear this kind of concept of focus. You know, do one thing well. But when you've got one business, which you know is maybe Maximal Concepts in your case, but you've got multiple businesses within that business, how do you manage all that?
So I again, I think it's part of the business cycle. I think you get to a point where you think as a younger version of me. And I know one of your questions that you want to end on, and my advice to myself 5 years ago would have been exactly what you just said, which is focus on less things and do it better. And that's what I'm doing today. But 5 years ago, we had 22 different concepts, 22 different cuisine types, and we're expanding different things around the world. And, you know, when you hit a bad economy spot, if you're not focused, your business will shrink quite rapidly, because you won't be able to maintain all of that stress and all of that pressure and all of those different changes that you have to adapt to. So, yeah, I mean, for me, focus, doing a few things really well and within your capacity is super important.
I get a lot of listeners reaching out to me talking about how they want to start a business, but they don't have money. And so what's your view on this money business thing? Do you, I mean, my view is that you can start a business without money. Of course, you can start a business with money. But what's your view? How did you start your business, and what's your view?
I think Simon, as you know, raising money is what a lot of people come out of university thinking is this mythical thing that they don't understand. You don't get taught it at school, um, but with the right idea, the right presentation, and the right contacts, it can be quite an easy part of the business. For me, executing is harder than raising money. Um, so, we've raised a lot of money over the last 10 years with different businesses, different business ideas. But the execution for me is much more complicated. It's to see through your business plan to the end. So yeah, I would say to young entrepreneurs, like, you shouldn't be afraid to try to raise money. Go out, get some advice from people who've done it before, work out how it's done. um, there's a lot of people out there willing to invest in small startups and help you, whether it's your family members, your parents, friends. As you said, I think it's always I think it's always possible to raise money.
If you were starting again today, do you think you raise more money, raise less money, have more investors, have less investors? Do you have any advice on that front?
I think I think you I think you want to keep things as simple as possible. So I don't think having a large group of investors is necessarily good for you unless it's a strategic move for the business, like a membership club, for example, where you want lots of people coming into the club. But I think simplicity is key, and I think as you develop your business and you grow your business, the more simple you can keep things, the more efficient, the more streamlined, the easier you can get from point A to point B. Um, it'll show massively to your stress levels and your ability to be able to process a lot of information further down the line. So yeah, that's also a very important factor.
How do you manage your stress, out of interest?
I mean, yeah. So we've got 8 different businesses now, and within each of those businesses, we've got quite a few different subsidiaries, and Maximal Concept has restaurants around the world. So for me, organization, efficiency, and simplicity is paramount to everything I do, and it's being consistent as well. Business is about communicating well to people, and staying on top of things. And if it's a complicated mess and you're not able to keep on top of it, you will lose control of that business.
But I don't think I've ever seen you actually stressed. So I'm interested in how you manage it, because you've got so many moving parts and such a big organization, but you're always smiling and you always look relaxed. What is the secret?
There's moments of my day where I say to myself, these are the 2 hours you need to be relaxed. There's moments in my day where I say, right, it's guns out. Let's get as much work done as possible and let's run. And it's really compartmentalizing. So, if you're running multiple businesses, you can't do them all at the same time. So this 2 hour block, we're doing this, and that's all we're doing. We're not going to get distracted by anything else, and we're going to get it done. And then once we've got that done, we'll move on to the next thing. And stress comes when you're thinking about too many things that you can't handle. And if you can't compartmentalize stress, so if you're having a bad day at home and you bring that stress into the office, you haven't compartmentalized. If you go into the office having gone, okay, right, I have some stress at home, I'm going to leave it there and then just look at this with a fresh new pair of eyes, that stress doesn't transfer from one division to another division. So I think, again, it's mindset. Um, but yeah, I'm like everyone else. I get stressed. I lose control of things. Things spin out of control, and you've just got to adapt, and you've got to keep yourself motivated, and you've got to keep your team motivated.
Do
And
you
I'm sure for the world right now, it's a stressful time for most people.
are you
So
are you worried about the coronavirus? From like, do you see it as SARS and it will blow over, or is this more serious?
my bet is, I mean, it's definitely more serious than SARS. How the Western world is going to handle it in the coming months is definitely going to be an interesting period of time in terms of business. And we've just got to keep our eyes open and stay positive, and keep adapting to the new challenges that come out of this.
Well, it's how I'm assuming it's affected your businesses quite dramatically, but how do you insulate yourself from that?
You can't. And if things aren't working, you've got to come up with ideas to make them work. There's a lot of problems in Hong Kong. We've got these skyrocketing rents, and we've got this economy where people aren't going out, they're not socializing like they were before, and you've got to think outside of the box right now. We're being creative with our landlords. We're working together with people that that we wouldn't have normally worked with, and we're coming up with deals that we wouldn't have thought of before. And all of those ideas that we generate help keep the business afloat through the bad times. And we've asked the team to help as well, and I think that's important. I think if you've given a lot to your team, and you say, guys, this is a period of time where everyone's struggling and we need your help, they're not going to help you if you never looked after them in the first place. And so it really comes back to, if you're going to weather the storm with people that you want to be with long term, and continue to grow the business when that storm passes.
So I think it's another good lesson for anyone listening out there about investing in your people. I think, to me, it reminds me of kind of like being on a boat, and if you don't feed your staff well on that boat, and then one day you run out of food, if everyone's not already well fed, you're not going to get to the finish line in the next few days. Everyone's going to die before you get there. So it's basically looking after your people, and I think it's something people overlook. As you're building a business, sometimes you're so busy. If you're in the service business like you are, and I've been in service business too, you're so busy looking after customers, there is a tendency to overlook the people that are looking after your customers. You spend so much time trying to make the customers happy that you forget. So it's a good reminder for people out there to look after your people. And I always say to my crew here that you're not working for me. We're working together. We're a partnership. But so many people forget that, right? I think sometimes they see it as, you're working for me, do this, and I'll get whatever I can out of you until the next person comes along. It's a big mistake.
Yeah. You know what? And I actually, that's good advice as well. I think it is when you're coming up with your business, everyone's so focused on the returns they can make. They're not focused on how much investment is going to be required for the team building aspect from it. So I think investing in the team, what you just said, that's also key, and if people could look at that slightly earlier rather than it's the second thing that you come to after you're successful, you'd probably get a better chance of becoming successful, because you'd be building a better team in the first place.
So true. Yeah. Do you think being an adventure athlete has helped you be a better entrepreneur? Do you think there's a parallel between the two worlds?
Yes. A lot of people say that it's still thrill seeking, it's chasing adrenaline, but it isn't. Doing extreme sports is all about managing risk. It's about assessing the situation, and it's about being adaptive to that. And if you pay the highest consequence in extreme sports if you get it wrong, and you pay it with your life. And so it's really about precision. And I think, precision in business is key to being successful as well. And compartmentalizing stress. Because if you can't compartmentalize stress when you're hanging to a wall at 6,000 meters, freezing at -20, you're not going to be able to get yourself out of a situation. And so being able to put your fears, your stress aside and deal with the situation, I find it good training. And it's kind of a weird thing to say, but I think one trains the other.
Totally.
And they are definitely related.
Wonderful. Well, look, we're going to jump over to YouTube now and do a Q&A with you. So I've got some great questions from our audience that want to ask you directly questions. So we're going to jump over to YouTube and do that now. But I just want to wrap up the podcast, which is 30 minutes, so people listen to it on their way to work. So thank you so much, Malcolm. I'm going to sum up what I've heard from you as the quick takeaways. Team welfare, folks. I think that's a very important thing to focus on more. If you're not focusing on it at the beginning of your business, make sure you're focusing on it right now. I love the story Malcolm gave about his advice from his mother, which is ride a horse to find a horse, which is pretty interesting thinking about that. It's much easier to find that horse. Know when to give up. I think that's a tricky path to tread when you link it to persistence, but something to truly get your head around and maybe consider. And I like the final point, which is stress comes when you're doing too many things. So I agree with that totally, and that's why I personally am doing one thing right now in this podcast and trying to do it well. So Malcolm, thank you so much. We'll jump over to YouTube now and do the Q&A, but thank you very much for being our podcast guest today.
Thanks, Simon. Appreciate it.